Hey y'all, thanks for joining today. I'm so excited to talk with you all. My co-plaintiffs are lead attorney and Christi. My name's Kelsey, you all know that, and I'm the named plaintiff on our Juliana v. U.S. case, and I reside in Eugene, Oregon. I'm 24 years old. When we first filed this case, I was 19. I want to quick go around and let you all introduce yourselves, anything that's important to your identity, and as well touch on your relationship to the film, please. So Levi, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Levi Draheim. I am 13 years old, he, him pronouns. So my connection to the film is I'm one of the plaintiffs. I joined the lawsuit at 8 years old. And so, yeah.
Awesome.
It's good. My name is Xiuhtezcatl. Sorry. I am an artist and an organizer and a plaintiff on this case. Been working with Christi and Julia for a really long time to help bring these stories to the world, and friends with the rest of the plaintiffs too. Grateful to be a part of this.
Yeah, guess that just leaves me. I'm Vic. I'm 21. I joined the lawsuit when I was 16 years old. I'm a climate justice activist, organizer, and a plaintiff on the lawsuit with Xiuhtezcatl, Levi, and Kelsey.
Hey everybody, I'm Julia Olson, and I founded our Children's Trust back in 2010, and I met Kelsey and Xiuhtezcatl in 2011, which is amazing, 9 years ago. And we've been working together to uplift the voices of youth and bring them in front of courts to advocate for their rights. I'm really excited to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Christi Cooper. I'm the director of Youth V Gov. I have been working on this film for almost 5 years now. When these plaintiffs filed the lawsuit in August of 2015. As some of them mentioned, I've known Kelsey and Xiuhtezcatl and Julia since 2011 and have been following these plaintiffs' stories of their fight in the courts for protecting their constitutional rights.
Awesome. Thanks for the intros. And it's good to see you all virtually. I want to start with my co-plaintiffs because we all just saw, and Julie, of course, but we all just saw the film for the first time the other day. But to the co-plaintiffs, to Levi, Vic, and Xiu, I just wanted to ask, what did that feel like when we watched not only our individual experiences and our memories, but also our collective experiences, the experiences of people, our co-plaintiffs, in our deposition rooms, all of that we've never seen before. So what was that like for you guys?
I can go first. Yeah, I think it was surreal. I didn't get to come to the screening, but I watched the movie by myself. And yeah, it's very bizarre, I think, in a lot of ways, to watch your lived experience being played out. And I think especially for all of us, just realistically, at least for me, I feel like those are really formative years of my life, who I was when the lawsuit started versus who I am now, or I'm the same person, obviously, but a lot of myself has developed and changed in so many ways. And also, I'm just a really nostalgic person. So I think a lot of my experience watching it was just going back to those days and places and remembering smells and jokes and what we ate that day. Just things like that, I think, is mostly what the movie brought up for me a lot. Just how going on a shift and being together and being a teenager. I think that's a lot of the feelings that it brought up for me. Even outside of the big picture of what we were doing, it was just watching myself grow up in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was really strange to see myself. It was in about 2 hours, just seeing myself from 8 years old to now. It just is oh wow, what happened? Oh, okay. It was very strange, and it's such an amazing experience getting to see everybody, being able to like Vic said, think being able to revisit the food that we ate was probably one of the best parts, and just seeing the movie overall was so amazing. It was like, wow, that was so, like, oh, this was so cool. And it was like, oh yeah, I remember that. It was just really cool. It brought up a lot of memories of being with all the other plaintiffs. Mm-hmm. It was really cool.
And the only thing that I would add to that is I think Christi did an incredible job of like visually illustrating the stories of a lot of these youth, because like even though we all get together in Oregon often to talk about and work on this case, I've never been to a lot of these kids' homes, and like a lot of my friends like communities, or witnessed and experienced the way in which they've been impacted by the climate crisis. And I think that was depicted in such a powerful way that gave their stories a lot of depth. And obviously, yeah, just like the love that we have for each other, you know, was you know, just seeing even just me and Vic's friendship, you know, me and Levi's friendship, just like going back, and just all of us, you know, there's just so much love there that I think is at the heart of this case. That was that really came through for me, you know, and I think it's really going to come through when audiences see that that's like a very foundational part of what this work is all about, really.
Yeah, Xiuhtezcatl, I think that was a really beautiful reflection, and I resonate with that. You know, one of the things that was unique watching this film was exactly that, is we're talking about an issue that stretches the globe and is certainly our generational issue, but you are understanding this history, or the story of climate injustice and climate impacts, through individual people and these stories and these lives. And I think that's what definitely stood out for myself, and sounds like for you. But Christi, we want to know how, I mean, that may be it, but how is this film different, you know, from the filmmaker's eyes than other climate films?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen a lot of films. Well, hopefully people have seen a lot of films about climate change already. And many of them have been focused on the climate science and the impacts of climate change. And those films are all super important and have really, you know, been groundbreaking in kind of paving the way for this story. But I think what's really so unique about this story is first of all, it's coming from your voices. It's the youth voice, and it's your experiences, your lived experiences. But it's really about the responsibility of why we are in this situation that we are today. This film, you know, as you guys know, is really focused on your case, which at its roots is about government accountability and government responsibility. And so I think what this story does so uniquely is not only showing that you guys have been directly harmed by climate change, but you're showing in a court of law, in order to prove your standing, that the government is the one who has directly harmed you, and that the courts can provide this needed solution or redressing this harm. So I think what a lot of people don't understand around climate change is that the government has actually engaged in these affirmative actions that Julia is so great at pointing out in the courtroom in the scenes that we have in the film. You know, they've known about the dangers of greenhouse gases and the impacts on climate change for over 60 years, but they locked you guys into this, you know, fossil fuel based energy system that locked you into these climate impacts. And so, you know, I'm really hoping with this film to kind of like flip the conversation on climate change, to put it on its head and kind of highlight the government's role and the government's responsibility in protecting its most vulnerable citizens, who are you guys. It's young people. It's the people with the least amount of political power, the least amount of say in how our democracy functions. So I think that's a really unique slant that this film has.
I totally agree. Julia, can you please hit on the main points of why this case is so different than any other climate litigation?
Yeah, I think it relates a lot to what Christi just said. This is the only case against the United States government that is based on constitutional rights. This is a human rights case. It's not an environmental case. This is about rights that are so fundamental and unalienable that government cannot intrude upon them. You know, your right to life and your freedoms, some cases your property is at risk, and your ability to pursue your happiness. A lot of other climate cases are about challenging individual fossil fuel projects or suing industry for the role they have played. And those cases are all really important too. This case that is going after the whole system, it's challenging the government's energy system that still is based largely on fossil fuels. And at a time when climate catastrophe is upon us and is worsening every day, government needs to be held accountable. And so that's what makes this case really special and different, in addition to being on behalf of you all, the youngest generation.
Yeah, and we've been in this case for 5 years. We've grown up in this case, like Vic and Levi and Xiuhtezcatl mentioned. We've evolved as into teenagers or even adults. And there's been a lot of ups and downs throughout that process. One of the most standout moments in the films for myself was when we were all meeting in Eugene, all of the plaintiffs and attorneys and supporters. And Nick said that, whatever else happens, this case will always be a beacon of hope. And this case will, we've made so much progress as is, that this case has set a foundation for future cases, if it comes to that. So, considering that there are always ups and downs and setbacks and delays and whatnot, what would you say, Julia, is the most important thing to focus on when one court decision may put wind in your sails, but another may feel like it sets you back?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of responses. The first is, I really believe, at the end of the film, you hear about next steps. And I 100% believe in this case, and I believe that we will prevail in the end. If I'm wrong about that, this case has laid a foundation that's really important. Sometimes when you go up to the Supreme Court, the court gets it wrong before it gets it right. And we've seen that throughout history. So the fact that we're bringing your stories and these arguments to the courts right now is just vital. And already you all have inspired youth around the world to stand up, not just in the streets and in political branches and in many other ways, but there are more than 20 lawsuits against governments around the world, in addition to all the cases at the state level here in the United States. And they're all led by youth, and they're all arguing for basic human rights. So we've already made a huge difference together in this case and in this work and in the story Christi tells in the Youth V Gov film. And there's more to come. So I'm excited about the future.
Yeah, and the film alludes to the constitutional rights of children and makes the point that children have not always had these rights. I mean, obviously we build and we expand law to be more inclusive, and we change with the times. So in a democracy where children can't vote, what rights can children know they have, and what do the courts recognize as rights of children in the United States?
Yeah, so we have a provision in our Constitution that requires equal protection of the law. And that equal protection applies to children, just as it applies to all genders and all races and, all religious beliefs. And children deserve special protection. And when we look at questions about children's lives and safety and security, courts often take a special look at that because children are disadvantaged in our political system without the right to vote. And so it's really an important part of this story is courts as our third branch of government stepping in and paying attention to young people and what they're experiencing with climate crisis.
So I want to thank you, Julia. I want to ask my peers, co-plaintiffs, Levi, Vic, and Xiuhtezcatl, just weigh in when you would like to. But this past year, we're still experiencing a global pandemic. I'm in Oregon on the West Coast. I just went through evacuation warnings, and friends lost homes just, miles up the river from me due to raging wildfires that are directly effect from runaway climate destabilization. And we're currently experiencing other catastrophic storm events. And as well, there's this massive social unrest and unearthing of a lot of incredibly harmful and problematic systemic issues related to settler colonialism, white supremacy, that are embedded in a lot of the founding of this country. So what is changing? I mean, we've been in this, at least in this movement through the case for 5 years, and for a lot of the plaintiffs on this case, longer than that. What is changing now about the climate crisis argument, and how is the climate movement different than that of generations before us, or even since when we first started in the climate justice movement?
I would just say, yeah. No, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of really important pressure being applied to climate organizations and the people in the climate organizing space to really consider like the ways in which we're engaging with this work. And I think people are really being confronted with the truth that like any work that is not explicitly intersectional, or acknowledges itself in a greater context to the other issues that our communities and our world is facing is really short-sighted, I believe. And I think that, it's a powerful opportunity for us to be more unified, for our struggles to be in like greater coordination with one another, and to really acknowledge and understand that, when we're talking about a stable climate, that conversation and the pathway towards that absolutely has to do with tackling, racial inequality and economic injustice and settler colonialism and colonial violence that is impacting, communities all over the world today. And yeah, so I think a lot of people are being thrown into this reality where it's like the environmental movement, has not always done a good job at representing the voices of both those that are most impacted and those who, frontline Black, brown, and Indigenous peoples who have been leading the fight for generations, and who, so yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure being applied right now, and people are really being expected to kind of step up and meet this moment to understand how this is all connected.
Thank you. Levi, did you want to weigh in on that? I saw you unmuted yourself, but no pressure.
Oh yeah, so like definitely echoing what Xiuhtezcatl said, there has been a lot more pressure put on the movement right now because everybody has to be represented equally, and I've been speaking on lots of panels, and I've seen a lot more diversity on the panels because of that pressure, and so that they're putting more. There's been a lot more panels than like that have people of different cultures, and so it's doing a better job of representing the people that are affected most. And so like overall, I know I keep on repeating myself, but there's been a lot more diversity in different panels. So the climate movement has been changing in those type of ways.
I think a common question that usually follows this dialogue is, this is again, especially to my co-plaintiffs, where do you find hope? How do you remain hopeful? And instead of asking that question, if you want to answer that question, definitely please do. But instead of asking that exact question, at the beginning of this panel, we talked about love and centering love as a way to build this new climate sound reality, etc. So building off that, I'm wondering how the three of you especially, how do you center that? How do you center love, or where do you center love to be able to do this work?
I can hop in really quickly. I think in terms of I could probably like sort of combine also those the two questions and like the sentiments they bring up. I think the first question in terms of how has the climate movement changed, and especially with everything going on, a lot of intersections need to be highlighted. The way Xiuhtezcatl said, like if you're talking about organizing, if you're trying to get people to go to protest, then know what mutual aid is. If you're trying to get people to create mutual aid in their community, understand their neighbors more, understand the people around them more, we need to be having conversations around intersectionality and in really intentional ways too, like in really educational, intentional ways that go past kind of, I think in the climate movement, we've always kind of, the only intersection between climate justice and racial justice that people can point to a lot of the times is environmental racism, instead of talking about the fact that the climate crisis and racial justice come from the same fundamental issues of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. And I think we need to be just having those conversations more upfront, which I'm happy has been happening in the climate movement, but there's definitely still way more room for organizations and individuals to really understand the fundamentals of how these issues intersect. I think that also has a lot to do with just talking more about the word of talking way more about abolition and understanding that the Black Lives Matter uprisings that have been going on and the demands they're asking for are so in line with everything that the climate justice movement has been fighting for a long time. And we need to understand that for Black and brown climate activists, when I imagine a world free from fossil fuels, that's also the same world where the police are defunded. And then we have to understand that that's how Black and brown people living at the intersections of being a climate activist and being Black and brown are thinking about these issues, not in sort of minor case studies of just individual examples of environmental racism. We're talking about a massive intersection. And I think that I feel like in the movie and in the film, even if it's kind of not something that's upfront, at least for me, like through those years, through everything that you're seeing, you know, we're also coming into a lot of our own power, into a lot of our own realizations about these things. Like the analysis and the thoughts that I have about the question you asked me maybe wouldn't be the same one I had at the start of this process, or even the same ones that I'd be able to get across in a speech. But I think that's what's also really cool about the film, is just getting to see us come into our power and our knowledge and grow into ourselves as activists. You know, we wouldn't just start doing this knowing everything. And then going to the second question, which was about where we find our hope and happiness, right? I think that I think that for me, where finding hope and happiness lately has been in mentorship and in learning and in realizing how much power I have in me specifically as like a Black and brown person, and realizing that there's so many things I didn't know that I knew about the climate movement, because the white mainstream climate movement has tried to like repackage so much traditional knowledge of Black people and Indigenous people and like sell it back to us with words like permaculture, when really that's just the way that like my people existed. So leaning into that power has been what's been bringing me hope.
Kelsey, can I just jump in? I think for me, the story that you see in the film between Vic and his dad, to me, is really emblematic of love and exactly what Vic just spoke of, about the ways to find mutuality and communication and understanding between people who have different views. And it's one of my favorite scenes is seeing Vic and his dad have that conversation. So I think it helps tie that message and story together.
I also wanted to say that, you know, in the course of following your guys' stories and knowing you guys over the course of these years, what I've learned most from you is that your generation has this unbelievable wealth of compassion and love and kindness that is like all encompassing in the work that you do. And you come at this work and you come into the climate justice movement with all of that love and compassion and empathy and looking at justice from just a real inclusive way. And for me, you know, as an older person, looking at the previous generations who have been working in this issue, like, I think your generation just really has brought in this completely different approach to equality and justice and elevating marginalized voices, and, you know, bringing those tools and the power to the people on the front lines. And I've learned so much from you guys because of that, and I am so incredibly grateful for that.
Thank you all. Really, I want to ask you real quick, because I'm sure many people are wondering, after seeing that film, it's a cliffhanger, and there's still obviously work to be done. So what does come next with the case?
Yeah, it's one of the amazing things about this film Christi has made is you don't often get to see the story of a case before it's finished. And to see the story of the plaintiffs and what this case is about before it ever goes to the Supreme Court on the merits. And so what comes next is we are waiting still for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to decide whether to take up sort of the final appeal it can take at this point, which would be 11 judges hearing the case and deciding whether it can go to trial or whether our next step is to petition the US Supreme Court for review. And I know there's been a lot of energy around the US Supreme Court lately. And, what I'll say to that is the story of this case and the case and the story that Christi tells in the film is not a partisan story. It's not about Democrats or Republicans or conservatives or liberals. It is a story about this deeply rooted oppressive system that is about climate, is about race, is about so many issues. And it's a systemic injustice that affects everybody. And the legal arguments we're bringing forward are about protecting life and liberty, which is foundational in the US Constitution. So I have great hope for this case going forward, and we are not nearly done.
That's right. Christi, I want to ask you real quick what you want you're hoping the impact for this film is.
I'm really hoping that people will, first of all, I don't know, there's a lot of things that I want people to take home from this film, but I really hope that people can understand the role that our
I think, Christi, we're gonna, oops. Alrighty, well, there's this new age we're in. I want to then open up and just sort of in wrapping this up and closing this out, ask all of you who you hope sees this film and what that takeaway is for all the viewers of this film. Why don't we start, Levi, do you want to start with you, and then we'll go, do you mind if we go Levi, Xiuhtezcatl, Vic, and Julia, kind of like for intros? Okay.
Yeah, cool. So I really hope that lots of young people get to see this film and be able to show that even though you're a kid, there's still things that you can do, even if you can't vote. And so I really want young people to be able to see this, be able to see and be empowered by young people taking action on what they believe is right. And I want them to take that away with them, because it's so important that they don't feel like they can't do anything and this issue is too big for them, because there is things that you can do to be able to take action, even if it is not suing your government, because not everybody has the ability to be able to do that. You can do little things like turning off the water when you're brushing your teeth. It just really shows in a good way that young people can take action on what they believe is right.
Thank you, Levi. Xiuhtezcatl, would you mind going next?
For sure. I think, I think there's a lot of young people that will see this story, and most importantly, just feel less alone. I think that's just, an important part of what I think this can contribute to the conversation, is seeing how this work as young leaders and as young people, engaging in movements like this can actually be a place where we can find a home, and we can find a community. And I think that's so for like, and because I know a lot of young people are seeing what's happening in the world right now, and it's isolating specifically because of like this pandemic too. It's like we're in an isolated moment, a lot of us. And so, yeah, I think just for young people out there who are interested, who are starting to get informed, who are starting to understand the different like kind of mechanics of these different unjust systems that are at the foundation of so many of the problems our society is experiencing, that they can watch this and feel more connected and in a part of something that is greater than any one of them. And feel that empowering way. So yeah, I hope young folks who are looking for that sense of community watch this and find a home, find that inspiration to seek that home.
Nice. Vic, would you mind going next?
Yeah, of course. I think that when I imagine like who I want to see this movie, I guess maybe like some version of myself when I was younger, like other young people of color. Maybe in particular to see this movie about young people who are actually like finding so much of the power that they have in themselves and finding out how much we can really do when we come together with love and community and confidence in our voices. And just seeing that and realizing that how genuine and wholesome that is. And, understanding that we were just the kids that got together to be on this lawsuit and got to be so fortunate to be plaintiffs on this lawsuit and get to be in this film, but that could be them also, I think is what I really want them to understand. So.
Can I jump in, Kelsey? I really want judges and lawyers and politicians and elected officials to see this film so they can understand what role the U.S. government has played in causing the climate crisis, and hopefully recast the next century in the course of history. But I also want people around the world to see this film, and I think that there's a global audience for this film, and it will inspire young people and lawyers and courts around the world to do what's right on climate and protect the human rights of young people today and the rights of future generations.
Yeah, Christi, do you want to go? And then I think I'll chime in real quick and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I think similar to what Vic and Xiuhtezcatl said, I really hope that other young people see their own story in your stories, and they see the power that they bring. And I think this film is for also my generation and my parents. And there's so much to learn about the judicial system, how our government works, our history, how we got here, what the solutions are, and really who holds the power. So I think that's, yeah, I hope everybody can watch this.
I'm the same. I want everyone to see this film. I think you learn, it's a history lesson, it's a science lesson. You learn so much. Everyone needs to see this film for academic reasons, for just, I just want everyone to see this film. Have I made it clear enough? But really, in my heart of hearts, like, I just deeply, deeply, deeply want young people to see this film, because out where everyone can benefit from watching Youth V Gov. What stood out to me was just, I learned so much about my co-plaintiffs, about, like Levi said, Levi was an only child. Now he actually has a sibling, but he also gained a family in the meantime with this case. And this is my family, and yet I learned so much about her personal stories. And I think that I've spoken to so many young people during this process to get them excited about this case and engaged in climate activism. And yet there are so many other voices out there that need to be the inspiration for young people. And the array of identities and lived experiences and opinions that is just within the 21 young people is so diverse. I really want, that those stories, and for us to be examples, to reach out to all types of youth, and just to show, like, everyone starts somewhere, but we all matter so deeply, and our voices are so crucial in this moment and in this movement. So I'm really excited to have young people see this and just be inspired and plug in.
Thank you, Christi.
Thank you guys.
For telling the story.
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys.
Lots of love.